Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez addressed the latest incursions of the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control on Venezuela as it took over the assets of CITGO, a subsidiary of Venezuela's flagship oil company, PDVSA. Israel's hostilities against Palestine persist as the Zionist regime continues to hold airstrikes against the Gaza Strip and advances occupation policies. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad received his Iranian counterpart Ibrahim Raisi as the diplomatic relations in the region improve. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. During a press conference in Caracas, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez addressed the latest incursions of the United States Office of Foreign Assets Control on Venezuela as it took over the assets of CITGO, a subsidiary of Venezuela's flagship oil company, PDVSA. Rodriguez explained the current dispute with OFAC dates back to 2017, when international institutions neglected and ignored Venezuelan government institutions with the purpose of stealing CITGO monomeros and gold reserves in the Bank of London, backed by Venezuelan opposition figures. The Venezuelan vice president highlighted the unlawful nature of these actions as they undermine the welfare and stability of Venezuelan people and violate the country's constitution by recognizing as legitimate an illegal National Assembly elected in 2015 and ignoring the results of subsequent democratic elections in 2020. On Wednesday, the Brazilian police raided the home of former President Jair Bolsonaro in Brasilia as part of an investigation into the alleged falsification of COVID-19 vaccination certificates, as local media reported. The federal police explained that it had carried out a total of 16 raids in Brasilia and Rio de Janeiro, targeting a criminal association suspected of inserting false COVID-19 vaccination data in the public health systems. However, it did not immediately confirm whether former President Bolsonaro was the main target of the police operation. Since his return to Brazil in late March, Bolsonaro has been inquired twice by the federal police for the investigation opened for the irregular entry into Brazil of valuable jewelry gifted by Saudi Arabia in 2021, and last week he testified as part of another investigation into his alleged role in the January 8th coup attempt. In Guatemala, the money laundering trial against journalist and owner of a local newspaper, Jose Ruben Zamora, started. Zamora, owner of El Periódico newspaper, has been in prison since last July, accused by the prosecutor's office of money laundering and racketeering, charges that he claims come in retaliation for dozens of publications denouncing corruption against Alejandro Yamatei's administration. Zamora's case has sparked international criticism and denunciations of attacks on freedom of expression. Zamora, who could be sentenced to up to 20 years in prison, claimed to be a political prisoner and assured that he is skeptical of the results. In that sense, he also assured that President Yamatei wants him to be convicted and he would continue to declare his innocence and denounce the attack on freedom of expression in Guatemala. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel gave the closing speech on Tuesday at the International Meeting of Solidarity with Cuba and Anti-Imperialism 200 years after the Monroe Doctrine, which was held in Havana. The president thanked all those who make of Cuba and the defense of its cause the meaning of their lives and for accompanying the island in the unwavering struggle against the United States blockade. On the other hand, Díaz-Canel ratified in front of more than 1,000 foreign delegates and some 200 nationals who attended the meeting at the Convention Palace in Havana that demand to remove Cuba from the arbitrary list of state sponsors of terrorism drawn up by Washington. In this context, the Cuban head of state thanked the international delegations for their presence and affirmed that human solidarity cannot be blocked.
Human solidarity cannot be blocked. It will remain an indestructible weapon of struggle and combat, and at the same time, an inexhaustible permanent message of peace impossible to silence. Homeland is humanity, a humanity supported by the workers. Solidarity forever. We will win. We will surely win. Until victory always.
In the United States, 2 men are dead and a woman is in critical condition after 3 separate stabbing attacks that occurred across several days in Davis, California. In this sense, Davis police chief Darren Peter described the attacks as brutal and violent, and that they do not have the characteristics of an attack that would occur during the course of a robbery or a similar crime. Patel further added that the city will not be introducing a curfew, but police are stepping up patrols all over town. Likewise, police authorities confirmed that while there were no witnesses to the first attack, descriptions of the suspect in the second and third stabbings are substantially similar. Meanwhile, federal authorities have joined the investigation but are so far unable to positively link the three crimes.
It's definitely very concerning, right? Especially for those of us that have class late at night or some kind of practice or club meeting that they want to go to.
Looking over my shoulder a little bit more, which I'm not sure if that's something that was necessarily my male counterparts were doing.
Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. Spanish King Philip VI welcomed Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who is on a state visit to discuss economic investment and migration policy. The Colombian head of state also met with Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez after addressing lawmakers at Spain's parliament. One of the main topics on President Gustavo Petro's agenda is the peace process with the National Liberation Army, which third cycle of dialogues is currently underway in Cuba's capital, Havana. The latest visit by the Colombian head of state to Europe came 2 weeks after he traveled to Washington to meet with his United States counterpart, Joe Biden. Workers from France's biggest union on Wednesday took to the streets again in rejection of Macron's pension reform. Energy workers gathered in Paris in response to a call from the union. This rally comes before the Constitutional Council decides, following a second request for a shared initiative for referendum submitted by the French left to keep the retirement age at 62. The unions and opposition parties have announced that they will not stop their mobilizations as long as the government does not withdraw this law. Meanwhile, President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne urged the social partners to take up the reform and its extension of the retirement age from 62 to 64 years.
We wanted to be here, a radar symbolic place in the Paris region, to mark our anger and to highlight this strike. In other words, we are going to be here all the time, everywhere. Energy conservation demonstration, blue trains, free hospitals, as long as this government has not withdrawn this law. We won't stop.
A teenage boy opened fire in a school in central Belgrade on Wednesday, killing 8 children and a school guard. The shooting occurred in the Vladislav Ribnikar Elementary School. In a statement, police identified the shooter by his initials KK and said he opened fire with his father's gun. The statement also said the young man was a student at the school and was born in 2009. Likewise, they added that 6 more children and a teacher were injured and hospitalized. Unlike in the United States, mass shootings in Serbia and in the wider Balkan regions are extremely rare, as none were reported at schools in recent years.
According to the evidence collected so far, the child KK has been planning this crime an extended period of time. The motive has not been established yet, and he didn't tell us what it was. He chose May 3, 2023 because the history class, which was the first lesson his class 7.2 was scheduled to have, was near the school entrance.
On Wednesday, Russian government authorities confirmed it downed 2 drones that targeted the Kremlin in Moscow and accused Ukraine of attempting to kill President Vladimir Putin. According to state news agency, the drones were disabled using electronic radar assets. Meanwhile, authorities also reported that President Vladimir Putin was not in the Kremlin at the time of the attack and there was no material damage to the building. In a statement, the Kremlin warned that Russia reserved the right to retaliate and that it viewed the assault as a terrorist attack. Likewise, government authorities also noted the incident came shortly before Russia's May 9th Victory Day parade, which foreign dignitaries are expected to attend. In Palestine, at least one person was killed and 5 others injured after an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip confirmed that Hashil Mubarak was killed during the airstrike. His family stated he was injured by falling debris and died at the hospital. The latest Israeli attack caused massive damages in the area and came shortly after the death of Palestinian leader Kader Adnan, who died in an Israeli prison after an 87-day hunger strike over his administrative detention.
Israeli fighter jets bombed the place here with 2 missiles within 3 minutes, and the second one struck the houses really hard. We thought they were completely destroyed. The children were afraid and screaming and kept saying, "Help us! The Israelis are bombing us." And I told them not to be afraid. I never heard such a loud missile sound such as the F-16. It shot the whole neighborhood and all our houses are destroyed.
And Zionist hostilities continue and intensified. On Wednesday, Israeli troops demolished the homes of 2 Palestinians accused of allegedly carrying out attacks on Israelis in the occupied West Bank last year. Demolitions targeted the home of Mohammed Souf and Yunis Helan, accused of car ramming and stabbing attacks, respectively, on November 2022. Israel, which has occupied the West Bank since 1967, routinely demolishes the homes of Palestinians it accuses of these alleged attacks on Israelis. In this sense, human rights activists reaffirm the policy amounts to collective punishment, as it can render non-combatants, including children, homeless.
This is collective punishment, and this is the occupation policy which we, as Palestinians, are familiar with and used to. We were confident this would happen because we have been through collective punishment before, and we are aware that this occupation is merciless and does not follow international convention or international or local law, and doesn't respect itself or other or orphans.
teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break, I will be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has met with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi on a 2-day official visit to Syria. Al-Assad stressed the historical ties between the two nations, which has survived severe political and security storms which have hit the Middle East without affecting the close relationship between the two peoples and governments. On his part, President Raisi reiterated his confidence that the people of Syria will rise from the war and will be able to rebuild what has been destroyed, and that they will witness the return of refugees. The ministerial delegation accompanying the Iranian president included the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Oil and Telecommunication.
Our joint vision is based on solid ground, on principles, on beliefs, always prioritizing the best interests of our peoples, their sovereignty and independence. Our relationship is based on loyalty. When in 1980 unfair wars was waged against Iran, Syria always supported Iran despite threats and temptations which arose at the time.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad spoke of the importance of the visit of his Iranian counterpart, Ibrahim Raisi.
We and you didn't play politics at all. We didn't put the fate of our countries and peoples in the hands of foreigners. But in the end, we bet on the victory of the truth, and we won the bet for all these reasons. Your visit today is important. Its importance derives from the depth of relations between our two countries.
On Wednesday, Myanmar's ruling military council announced the release of over 2,100 political prisoners as a humanitarian gesture. The identities of those pardoned has not been disclosed, but it is known that Suu Kyi, who serving a 33-year sentence for more than a dozen alleged charges, will not be pardoned. Thousands others remain in prison on charges associated with non-violent protests, or criticism of military rule, which began when the military seized power in February 2021. This massive prisoner release coincides with the most important day of the year in the Buddhist calendar. The military junta is in the habit of releasing prisoners on special dates like last April 17th, which marked the country's traditional New Year when they released over 3,000 prisoners. Meanwhile, just on April 12th, the junta had launched a deadly airstrike against a village in central Myanmar, killing 160 people, including 27 women and 19 children.
I am waiting for prisoners who are in prison under 505, but I already knew my husband Nain Yang Lin wouldn't be on the list for amnesty because he's a former Yangon Region Social Affairs Minister who has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. But I hope for a journalist to be released because today is his mother's funeral day. His mother will be cremated this afternoon. I really want him to be released and see his mother's face for the last time.
We who are charged under Section 505 of the law are being released, but here there are many prisoners with other charges who are still left in the prison. I want to ask people to stay strong for these prisoners. I want people to be strong in their minds for their living.
On Wednesday, clashes rocked Sudan troops amid a visit by top United Nations official Martin Griffith. Persistent fighting between Sudan's rival generals undermined efforts to consolidate a truce on Wednesday, despite the presence in Sudan of the UN representative seeking talks to bring relief to millions of trapped civilians. Griffith's visit comes a day after it was announced that the warring sides had agreed in principle to a 7-day ceasefire, but that the parties have failed to materialize. At least 550 people have been killed and almost 5,000 wounded, according to the latest figures provided on Wednesday by the Health Ministry. In this context, tens of thousands of Sudanese are also reported to have fled to neighboring countries in an exodus that has sparked warnings of a humanitarian catastrophe with implications for the entire region. On Wednesday, authorities in Rwanda announced that the heavy rains and floods in the last few days have already left more than 100 people dead in the western region of the country. The permanent secretary of the Ministry of Emergency and Disaster Management of Rwanda, Philip Habinchuri, declared that they plan to evacuate the people living in the areas most affected by the floods to avoid more deaths. It was known that the most affected districts were Ngoro, Rorero, Rubavu, Rutsiro, and Karongi. Authorities also indicate that the number of victims could increase as search and rescue operations continue in the area to search the areas that are cut off. We have come to the end of this news briefing, and you can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.